I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE, a global center of excellence for geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Learn how you can put geopolitics to work for your organization at ranenetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to the Essential Geopolitics podcast by RANE. On December 3rd, South Korea's now impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, an act which was shortly followed by a unanimous vote by lawmakers to reject the decree. Here to discuss South Korea's political environment leading up to the declaration and the subsequent political fallout is one of RANE's Asia-Pacific analysts, Chase Blazek. Hi, Chase. How's it going?
Hey, Emma. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you as well. Can you start by explaining exactly what happened on December 3rd and how it led to Yoon's impeachment?
Yeah, sure thing. So late on December 3rd, and it bled into the early hours of December 4th, Yoon did two things. So he made a martial law declaration based on a national emergency, which he says was some combination of the political opposition impeding governance and North Korean forces trying to influence the government. He never really laid out exactly what that was. So this was the declaration. And under the South Korean constitution, the terms of what a national emergency is are quite vague. And so that was actually, some could argue, legal or even constitutional. But what he did directly after the declaration was put out a martial law decree. And some of the things in that decree were sort of like implementing martial law. Some of those things were much more clearly illegal or even unconstitutional, such as ordering the National Assembly, South Korea's legislature, to stop functioning, trying to get the troops to break into the National Assembly and stop an active meeting, and trying to get troops, military troops, I should say, to arrest the heads of both the opposition Democratic Party, or DP, and the ruling People Power Party, or PPP, which is Yoon's own party. So he wanted to stop the legislature from functioning and arrest the heads of these two parties, both actions which were questionably legal or even constitutional.
Can you talk about some of the events or the political situation that led up to this decree of martial law?
Yeah. Well, actually, I will. I'll do you one better though. I'll finish that previous thought about how this resolved, because I realized I just kind of gave it a cliffhanger there. A lot of the folks who were involved, either the commanders or the grassroots level troops in carrying out martial law, refused to carry out some of Yoon's orders. So they refused to use their weapons. Some of these folks had live ammunition. They refused to use them against citizens and against legislators. They refused to break into the National Assembly without using violence, which they would have needed to, because there were quite a few protesters and lawmakers trying to stop this. And they were not able, or refused, to stop the National Assembly from voting to overturn martial law, which is ultimately what led Yoon to say, all right, never mind, no more martial law, because that is in the Constitution. The National Assembly can vote to, for lack of a better phrase, overturn martial law. So that's how this all played out over this very active night from December 3rd to the 4th. But to your question, what led up to this, or what led Yoon to take what seems like a very extreme act, was years, really, since he was elected to the presidency on May 2022. Years of pretty, how could I say this, rivalrous politics and activities by the opposition DP in South Korea that Yoon alleged, and he kind of had a decent point on this, not on martial law, but on this point in general, is that the DP was basically impeding his governance. So since he came into office, the DP had been ramming through whatever policies they liked through the legislature, because they had the votes, and then all these would have to go to Yoon, who would veto them, and then it would go back to the legislature, and generally the DP would not have enough votes, because they're just shy of a 2/3 majority in the National Assembly, to overturn those bills. So that was irksome or annoying to the president, to President Yoon, but it's not crazy unprecedented. We see this in many countries and many democracies, that when one party comes into power, They wield that power however they like, and if they don't need the votes of the opposition party, they don't need them, and they will pass whatever policies they want. So this made Yoon mad, but wasn't necessarily something out of the ordinary. The opposition went further, though, in that they started really 12 to 18 months ago heavily using impeachments of Yoon's officials to stop him from being able to govern. Whenever one ministry or area of the government was doing something that the opposition in the legislature didn't like, they'd impeach the head of that ministry. They did this to the Korean Communications Commission a number of times. They went through 3 or 4 different heads in the span of like a year because the opposition alleged that Yoon was using the Korea Communications Commission to basically crack down on liberal or left-leaning media, and thus they just kept on impeaching these heads of the KCC or threatening to do so, and then soon after it just so happens that person would resign because they don't want the infamy of being impeached. And so they were doing this to the KCC. They threatened to do this against the defense ministry before martial law was ever declared, so it's even prior to that, to the prosecutor's office and a number of other ministries or departments of the government, such that Yoon alleged they were basically stopping him from being able to govern, because anytime they didn't like his policies, they just kick his folks out of office. And this was made easy because in South Korea, all you need is a simple majority in the national legislature, which is a unicameral, so there's only one house and no one else to check them. You just need a simple majority to impeach a cabinet official. And they always had this, the opposition did. Of course, these impeachments would then later go to the Constitutional Court within 6 months, which would then rule on whether or not this impeachment was valid. But in the meantime, those officials were suspended from their duties. So effectively, they were by fiat just replacing Yoon's officials, and he'd have to go, or ousting Yoon's officials, and he'd have to go searching for another one to implement his policy. The DP was also refusing to appoint new justices to that constitutional court, the very same court that's supposed to be ruling on the validity of these impeachments. So the National Assembly has to choose new justices, at least 3 of the 9 new justices, and the DP was refusing to put forward new appointments or new nominations for those justices until after martial law, at which point they wanted new justices on the court in order to confirm Yoon's impeachment. So for many of these reasons, one could have some sympathy for Yoon and say, well, yeah, if I was in his shoes, I would feel very much hemmed in by the opposition and feel like I was not even capable of governing. So that was 2 years of this, and this led up, along with a number of other events that I won't go too deep into here, to Yoon eventually deciding to declare martial law to try and fix this. And I've already mentioned that was easily overkill, but that was his reasoning. All of these events were preventing him from governing, so this is what he had to do.
What about Yoon's impeachment himself? Is that a similar sort of impeachment to the ones that his cabinet members went through?
Yeah, that was a bit more difficult because there's a higher bar. You need 2/3 of the votes in the National Assembly to impeach the president, which is why they had threatened to do so basically since Yoon came to office, but knew they never really had the votes for, so they never tried it. Then when Yoon declared martial law, which brought even some PPP, like ruling party, Yoon's party, folks to the national legislature to condemn Yoon, when the martial law declaration happened, the DP felt, oh good, our moment has come, we have enough of a trigger, enough of a justification to put forward a vote, and we think we'll actually have enough votes to really impeach Yoon this time. They tried it the first time. The actual date of it is escaping me, but a few days after the martial law declaration. And they got a few PPP voters to vote along with them, the opposition, but still not enough to impeach Yoon. Then they tried it roughly a week later on December 14th, and that's when, in the second vote, they got at least 12 of the 108 PPP lawmakers to vote with them, putting them over the threshold to actually impeach Yoon. So when that happened, he was, by law, immediately suspended from his duties, even though he's still technically president. And now the case is going before the court, who has 6 months to rule on this, just like they do with any cabinet official, on whether they believe this impeachment is valid or not. If they say yes, then Yoon will be officially ousted from his duties, and there will be an early presidential election scheduled for 60 days after that point. If the trial or the court says no, this was not a valid impeachment, or they have a mistrial or something to that effect, Yoon will have his duties reinstated and resume his duties as president, and the opposition will not be able to pursue him for a similar impeachment case for the same reasoning, i.e. for this martial law. That doesn't mean they won't try. They might say, well, we're doing it for a different reason, a different aspect of the martial law that we also think was illegal, but that's far down the line from now. Previous impeachment cases against South Korean presidents in the Constitutional Court, even though they have 6 months to rule because of the importance of this, of ruling on whether the president needs to be ousted from office, they tend to rule in 2 to 3 months. And that pace is looking about right, because they've already done about 3 hearings for Yoon. They're projected to do 8 hearings in total and then make a decision. And they've been going through these hearings at about 2 a week. So we can expect within a month they will have exhausted all of these hearings and will make a ruling on Yoon's impeachment. In the meantime, there are acting presidents. Obviously, someone has to fulfill these duties. That's another interesting point of this story is the DP didn't stop being disruptive to government in the eyes of the PPP and Yoon after martial law. In fact, they continued what some would call their shenanigans. They impeached the acting president because they thought he was not sufficiently in support of their policies. For example, he passed through some of the justices they wanted to appoint to the Constitutional Court after the martial law declaration, so they impeached him. Now there's a new acting president, Choi, who's the former finance minister, and they've threatened to impeach him as well if he doesn't do various actions, including earlier they requested, prior to Yoon's arrest, they requested that this acting president demand the presidential security services that were defending Yoon to step down and things of that like. So they could still impeach the acting president. So if they don't like what he's doing in the meantime, while we're waiting for Yoon's fate to be decided. So even in this tumultuous period where we don't know whether the president's going to stay in office, there's still room for yet more political stability because there could be more acting presidents who are impeached, which just increases the churn in the top leadership and makes it difficult for the government, I should say the cabinet, to get their job done, especially if the DP also chooses to resume their former practice of impeaching cabinet officials themselves. So there's plenty of room for political stability here, even prior to or ahead of the ruling of the Constitutional Court.
Is it likely in the future that something will change in terms of how easy it is to impeach a cabinet member or a president?
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're getting at. That could change. There could be a number of things that could change. This and other aspects of the South Korean Constitution, which was formed in, if I'm not mistaken, 1987, after a long, painful period of authoritarian rule and some martial law back then. So the Constitution has many elements in it that are meant to restrict the powers of each branch of government. So there have been calls throughout the years to change that, to change the Constitution. The problem with all of these calls is they tend to happen, the call is announced or brought forth by a party, a political party, that would benefit from that particular constitutional change. So for example, prior to Yoon's martial law declaration, the head of the DP, Lee Jae-myung, he was calling for constitutional change to change the presidential term limits from one single 5-year term to 2 4-year terms, something more similar to the U.S. system, which would have benefited him because it would have ended Yoon's term, which started in 2022, 1 year sooner than the 2027 deadline, and would have brought presidential elections forward a little bit, which for the DP at the time, this is back in 2024, that would be seen as good because the DP's popularity was significantly better among the public than the PPP. Then after the martial law declaration, the head of the DP, Lee Jae-myung, deflected on that question. He was asked, do you still support constitutional change for the presidential term limits? And he said, I don't think that's the most important thing. I think we should be pursuing the impeachment. So that's a perfect example of why it's really difficult to get constitutional change done in South Korea, because to change the constitution, you need at least a 2/3 vote in the National Assembly, which means in almost all cases, you need to reach across the aisle and find issues that both parties can agree we need to change. And then you also have to hold a national referendum, so a vote among all the South Korean people, and get at least half of those who vote to say, yes, we agree, we think this is an important enough issue and it warrants constitutional change. And that has just been such a high bar for South Korea and for many countries to make such constitutional changes that it's just been too difficult to pass. And I don't see that changing anytime soon because of those political dynamics.
For more risk insights and analyses, visit ranenetwork.com, where you can learn more about our suite of risk intelligence products and solutions. That's RANE network.com. Thanks for listening.